You reached out, you apologised, you thought, this time things are going to be different. But before long, old patterns came back, conversations turned into blame again. Nothing had really changed. If that's happened to you, you are not alone. Family reconciliation fails far more often than people realise. Today, I'm going to tell you exactly why that happens and, more importantly, what you can do to make sure it does not happen to you. I'm a chartered counselling psychologist specialising in family estrangement, and for over a decade I've helped parents and adult children navigate cut-offs, rebuild trust and decide whether reconciliation is truly possible. I support people through the entire journey, from deciding whether reconciliation is even right to creating relationships that actually last. I also know this world personally. I've experienced estrangement and reconciliation in my own family. So when I talk about why reconciliation fails, I'm not speaking from theory alone. And what I've learned is this: reconciliation rarely fails because people don't care enough. It fails because of predictable mistakes families make again and again. The good news: once you understand them, you give reconciliation a real chance to succeed. Let's get into it. The first and probably biggest reason family reconciliation fails is something I call the reality war. This is when a parent and an adult child come into reconciliation, each carrying their own version of what happened. And instead of holding those different perspectives with curiosity or flexibility, one or both becomes determined to prove that their version is the right one. I see this all the time. A parent might say, "That never happened, you're remembering it wrong. It wasn't like that at all." And I understand that impulse when someone describes your parenting in a way that feels unfair, painful, or simply untrue. The natural human reaction is to defend yourself, to correct the record, to set the story straight. But here is the crucial point, especially if you are a parent trying to reconcile. The moment reconciliation turns into a battle over whose reality is correct, the process is already starting to break down. Not necessarily because you are wrong, and not because your adult child's memory is a perfectly objective recording of events. Memory doesn't work like that. Memory is emotional, it is interpretive, it is shaped by the nervous system of a child who was trying to make sense of their world. And this is exactly why this becomes so important. Your adult child's experience of growing up in your home was real. It was their lived reality. Whether or not it matches your memory, it shaped who they became. It shaped how safe they feel in relationships, how much they trust others and themselves. You don't have to agree with every detail, but you do have to accept that this was real for them, that it had weight, that it had consequences. One of the most powerful things a parent can do in reconciliation is what I call finding the doorway to understanding. This means slowing down the conversation and becoming curious about your child's experience, even if it feels uncomfortable or unfair. So, for example, your child shares, "When you told me I was too sensitive in front of everyone, I felt humiliated." A good response to this would be, "I can see how that could have felt embarrassing. I didn't think about that at the time." This is the doorway to understanding, and it validates their experience. Even if you believe your child's overall story is exaggerated or incomplete, there is almost always something you can recognise and take responsibility for. Maybe you were under intense stress at the time, maybe you didn't manage your emotions as well as you would today, maybe you simply weren't as present as your child needed. Start there, because one sincere acknowledgement is worth far more than 1,000 explanations or justifications. When you push your version of reality onto your adult child, it doesn't just slow reconciliation, it damages it. What they often hear is, "Your inner experience can't be trusted, you're wrong about your own life." For many adult children, that isn't a new wound, it's an old one reopening. And when that happens, reconciliation doesn't just stall, it can collapse completely, because now they have fresh evidence that nothing has truly changed. The second major reason reconciliation fails is defensiveness. It's closely linked to the reality war, but it shows up in so many everyday ways that it deserves its own focus. Defensiveness can sound like explaining yourself before you've fully heard the concern. It can look like bringing up what the other person did wrong the moment they raise something painful. It can be tears that shift the focus onto your distress before theirs has been acknowledged. It can be silence and withdrawal, which often feels like punishment or stonewalling, or minimising, saying things like, it wasn't that bad, or you're being too sensitive. From the inside, these reactions don't feel defensive, they feel like self-protection, like trying to give context, like being deeply misunderstood. But from the outside, especially for an adult child who has gathered enormous courage just to have this conversation, defensiveness is devastating. It sends a powerful message. You are not safe to be honest with me. And if honesty doesn't feel safe, reconciliation simply cannot happen. So what do you do with that very human impulse to defend yourself? This is where I often draw on principles from non-violent communication developed by psychologist Marshall Rosenberg. It's one of the most profound ideas is this: behind defensiveness is usually an unmet need. Behind attack is often an unspoken pain. So if you can slow down enough to notice what is happening in your body, when that defensive wall starts rising, you create a crucial choice point, a moment where you can respond instead of reacting. Practically, the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is simple. Pause and reflect back what you've heard before you respond. Not as a technique, not to buy time, but to make sure you have truly understood. For example, what I'm hearing is that when I did this, you felt like you didn't matter to me. Is that right? That kind of response doesn't just keep the conversation going, it does something far deeper. It tells your adult child, I hear you. And for many of them, that is what they have been longing for, sometimes for decades. Now, I want to turn to the other side of this. Reconciliation is always a two-way process. The responsibility may not be perfectly equal, but both people shape what happens next. So if you're an adult child trying to rebuild a relationship with your parent, there are some important things you need to know. And this part can be uncomfortable to hear. How you communicate your pain matters. Your hurt is real, your grievances are valid, you have every right to feel what you feel. But if you want to be truly heard, if you want reconciliation to have a genuine chance, you need to think carefully about how you express those truths. When pain has been carried for years, it can come out as an attack, as criticism, as contempt, even when that isn't your intention. It can sound like accusations instead of sharing your experience. It can become statements about who your parent is rather than what they did and how it affected you. And I want to be very clear about this. This is not about protecting your parents' feelings at the expense of your own truth. It's about effectiveness, because attacking communication almost always creates defensiveness, and a defensive parent simply cannot hear you. This is not about softening your truth. It's all about communicating your truth in a way that actually lands. So, frameworks like non-violent communication can be incredibly helpful here. The core shift is simple. Instead of leading with what your parent did wrong, start with your own experience. You focus on specific observable behaviour, not character judgments. You name what you felt using real feeling words rather than disguised accusations. And you connect that feeling to a deeper unmet need. For example, instead of saying, you were a narcissist who only cared about yourself, which, however true that may feel, it will always trigger a defensive shutdown. You might say, when my achievements weren't acknowledged as a child, I grew up feeling invisible, like my inner world didn't matter. The truth is the same, but one version shuts the door and the other invites the conversation in. And this next point is important to state plainly. Reconciliation between a parent and an estranged adult child is not a perfectly balanced dialogue. Adult children often carry more grievances. They usually have done more emotional processing before the conversation even begins. And in many cases, much of the responsibility for what went wrong does sit with the parent. That reflects the reality of the power difference in the parent-child relationship. Children cannot be expected to navigate these dynamics with the skill and awareness of an adult. So I'm not asking adult children to pretend the responsibility is equal when it isn't. What I am asking is that you communicate your experience in the most effective way possible, because you deserve to be heard. And when you speak in ways that reduce defensiveness in your parent, you give yourself the best possible chance of that happening. Now, there is another issue that is often overlooked in family reconciliation, and that is pacing. One of the most common mistakes I see is treating reconciliation like a single event instead of a process. people have one big emotional conversation, things feel hopeful afterwards, and then they rush straight back into something that looks like a normal relationship, but the deeper work hasn't actually been done. So the old dynamics slowly return, old triggers get activated, old patterns take over, and before long both people are left feeling with the painful feeling that nothing has really changed. So real reconciliation is slow. It isn't built in one conversation. It's built in small, consistent moments of repair over time. It grows when a parent follows through on what they said they would do differently, even if it's uncomfortable and difficult. It grows when an adult child allows trust to return gradually and cautiously, in careful increments, not all at once. And it grows when both people are willing to tolerate the discomfort of change, because genuine reconciliation will change you. It's also important to understand this. Reconciliation is not linear. There will be setbacks. There will be moments that feel like regression, like all the progress has suddenly disappeared. And these moments are not proof that reconciliation are failing. They are a normal part of the process. I really want to emphasize that. The real question is not whether setbacks will happen. They will. The real question is whether you have built a strong enough foundation together to survive them. The families I see succeed at reconciliation tend to share a few key qualities, and those are: parents are willing to prioritise understanding over being right. Adult children communicate their needs in ways that give the relationship a real chance. Both sides practice patience, and underneath it all, there is a genuine desire to truly know each other, not to just appear reconciled. And there is something else that many families struggle to accept. Reconciliation is not about going back to how things were. Many parents understandably long for a return to the old normal, but real reconciliation does not restore the past. It asks you to build a new kind of relationship with new boundaries, new expectations, and often a new way of seeing each other. This can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it requires letting go of familiar roles and assumptions. But when families are willing to do that, they create the possibility of a relationship that is not just repaired, but it's more honest and it's more resilient than before. So, before you reach out, or before you respond to that reach out, ask yourself, am I trying to get the old relationship back, or am I willing to help build a new one? Because the answer to that question will shape everything that follows. If this video helped you, make sure you're subscribed.